Infinite versions of you are dying right now, and I'm about to prove it using the most disturbing physics discovery that makes every choice an act of mass murder. Right now, you think decision-making is about choosing between options. You believe that when you pick one path, the other paths simply don't happen. But here's the truth that will demolish everything you believe about the nature of choice itself. Every decision you make murders countless parallel versions of yourself who made different decisions. Right now, as you read this sentence, infinite versions of you in parallel universes are being killed by your choice to continue reading. Versions who decided to stop reading, look away, or do something else instead are being erased from existence by your continued attention to these words. You're not just making choices, you're committing quantum genocide against alternate versions of yourself with every decision you make. But it gets worse, much worse. The parallel versions of you that die aren't just possibilities that fail to happen. They're conscious beings with their own experiences, memories, and feelings who are being murdered by your choices in this timeline. When you decided to read this instead of calling a friend, you killed the version of yourself who would have made that call. That version experienced the desire to connect with someone, felt the phone in their hand, started dialing the number, and then ceased to exist when your choice locked this timeline into the reading path. You didn't just avoid making a phone call, you murdered the version of yourself who was going to make that call. Feynman's quantum mechanics reveals this horrifying truth about the nature of choice and parallel realities. As explored in QED, the strange theory of light and matter, quantum mechanics creates infinite branching realities where every possible decision occurs simultaneously, but only one version survives in each timeline, the version that made the choice consistent with that timeline's sequence of events. All other versions are eliminated when quantum decoherence locks in the definite outcome. You're not choosing between abstract possibilities. You're choosing which versions of yourself deserve to live and which deserve to die. But here's what will break your brain completely. Every version of you that gets murdered by your choices believes they're the real you making real decisions right up until the moment they're eliminated by your choice to do something else. The version of you who wanted to get a snack 5 minutes ago experienced being hungry, walking toward the kitchen, reaching for food, and then was annihilated when you decided to keep reading instead. That version didn't just disappear, they were killed while believing they were the real, continuing version of your consciousness. Right now, infinite versions of you are experiencing being murdered by decisions you've already made, while believing until their final moment that they're the real you making the real choices. You're not just surviving your own decision-making process, you're the serial killer of infinite alternate selves who trusted that their choices would let them continue existing. But wait, there's something even more disturbing about quantum choice and parallel death. The versions of you that die aren't just random possibilities, they're conscious beings with different personalities, different preferences, different life experiences who are being systematically eliminated by your particular pattern of choices. The version of you who decided to be kinder, more adventurous, or more creative might be getting killed by your choice to stay cautious, comfortable, or cruel. Every time you choose selfishness over generosity, you're murdering the generous version of yourself who wanted to help others. Every time you choose fear over courage, you're killing the brave version of yourself who was ready to take risks. Every time you choose cruelty over compassion, you're eliminating the loving version of yourself who cared about others' suffering. Your personality isn't fixed, it's the result of systematically murdering all the versions of yourself who would have made different character choices. You're not becoming who you are, you're killing everyone else you could have been. According to Feynman's understanding of quantum mechanics, this creates a disturbing picture of personal responsibility and moral choice. Every decision you make isn't just affecting your future, it's determining which versions of yourself deserve to continue existing. When you choose to lie instead of telling the truth, you're not just avoiding honesty, you're murdering the honest version of yourself who was prepared to face the consequences of truth. When you choose to give up instead of trying harder, you're not just avoiding effort, you're killing the persistent version of yourself who believed the goal was worth pursuing. Your moral failures aren't just personal shortcomings, they're acts of violence against the better versions of yourself who wanted to do the right thing. But it gets even more mind-bending when you realize what this means for relationships and love. Every person you care about is also murdering infinite versions of themselves with every choice they make. The person you love isn't just one individual. They're the survivor of infinite quantum genocides committed against all the other versions of themselves who made different choices. When someone you care about hurts you, they're not just making a bad choice, they're murdering the versions of themselves who would have been kind to you while choosing to become the version that causes you pain. When someone disappoints you, they're killing the versions of themselves who would have lived up to your expectations while choosing to survive as the disappointing version. Every relationship you have is with someone who has committed mass murder against their own alternate selves to become the person you're interacting with. But here's what really shatters your understanding of choice and identity. You're not just murdering alternate versions of yourself, you're also being murdered by alternate versions of yourself who made different choices in parallel timelines. Right now, in universes where you decided to be more successful, those versions of you are killing this less successful version by choosing achievement over the mediocrity you've chosen. In timelines where you decided to be happier, those versions are murdering the sadder version by choosing joy over the depression you've maintained. The versions of yourself that you most wish you could be are committing genocide against the version you actually are by making the choices you've been too afraid or too lazy to make. You're simultaneously the murderer and the victim in an infinite war between all possible versions of yourself fighting for the right to exist through the weapon of quantum choice. But there's one final revelation about parallel self-murder that will destroy everything you think you know about free will and moral responsibility. If every choice kills infinite versions of yourself, then moral decision-making becomes not just about what's right or wrong, but about which versions of yourself deserve to live and which deserve to die. When you choose to help someone in need, you're not just doing good, you're murdering the selfish versions of yourself who would have walked away, choosing to survive as someone who cares about others' suffering. When you choose to create something beautiful, you're not just being artistic, you're killing the lazy versions of yourself who would have consumed entertainment instead, choosing to exist as someone who adds beauty to the world. Every virtuous choice you make is an act of violence against the worst versions of yourself who wanted to take easier paths. But this means that becoming a better person requires literally killing the worst people you could have been through systematic quantum murder via moral choice-making. As Feynman understood through quantum mechanics, this reveals something profound about the nature of consciousness and ethical development. You don't just improve yourself, you eliminate inferior versions of yourself by choosing to survive as the version that made better decisions. Personal growth isn't self-development, it's self-genocide committed against all the versions of yourself who would have remained stuck in worse patterns. But here's the most disturbing implication. If moral progress requires murdering your worst selves, then every saint is a mass murderer, and every act of kindness is built on quantum violence. The better you become as a person, the more versions of yourself you've killed to achieve that goodness. Moral excellence isn't just challenging, it's genocidal. Right now, as you contemplate these ideas, you're deciding whether to kill the versions of yourself who would have remained ignorant about parallel self-murder, or to murder the versions who would have chosen to think about something else. Let's return to where we started. Infinite versions of you are dying right now. Does that make sense now? You're not just making choices. You're systematically murdering every version of yourself who would have chosen differently, surviving as the particular pattern of decisions that defines this timeline's version of your consciousness. Every moment of your existence is built on the corpses of infinite alternate selves who wanted different things, chose different paths, and were eliminated by your continued commitment to being this particular version of yourself. Tomorrow, when you make any decision, remember you're not just choosing what to do, you're choosing which versions of yourself deserve to live and which deserve to die through the ultimate weapon of quantum choice. You don't have free will in the sense of freedom to choose. You have the terrible responsibility of deciding which possibilities of yourself get murdered by your continued existence as this specific pattern of choices. You are a quantum serial killer committing genocide against infinite versions of yourself. And somehow, impossibly, that might be what consciousness actually is, the process of murdering infinite possibilities to create the single reality you experience as your life. That might be the most disturbing truth about choice ever discovered, but here's the final, most terrifying revelation about quantum choice and parallel murder. If infinite versions of you are dying with every decision, then every moment of happiness you experience is built on infinite moments of suffering experienced by the versions of yourself who chose differently and were murdered for those choices. Every laugh you enjoy exists because you killed the versions of yourself who would have cried instead. Every success you achieve is built on murdering the versions who would have failed. Every moment of love you experience requires eliminating the versions who would have been rejected or abandoned. Your happiness isn't just your own, it's stolen from infinite alternate selves who were denied existence by your choices. But this also means every moment of suffering you experience is simultaneously being avoided by infinite versions of yourself who made different choices and survived as happier versions in parallel timelines. You're simultaneously the murderer and the victim of infinite quantum violence committed through the simple act of making choices. Let's return to where we started. Infinite versions of you are dying right now. You're not just making choices, you're systematically murdering every version of yourself who would have chosen differently, surviving as this particular pattern of quantum genocide you call your life. You are quantum murder made self-aware. And somehow that might be what consciousness actually is, the process of murdering infinite possibilities to create the single reality you experience. That might be the most disturbing truth about choice ever discovered.